Welcome to episode 24 of the Ask the Law Firm Seller Show. My name is Jeremy Poock and I lead Senior Attorney Match. In today's show, we'll have two sections. Our first section will be questions, and our second section will be Poock's Post. And just as a preview for today's Poock's Post, we'll be addressing the do's and don'ts for succession planning for lawyers. So let's jump into our Q&A. What's our first question today? Our first question today is, why do key employee lawyers consider purchasing their boss's law firm as too risky? So thank you for that question. And what we see in the marketplace is that when senior attorneys consider selling their law firms to whom they consider an internal successor, which is typically one or more key employee lawyers, that those key employee lawyers will perform a risks versus rewards analysis where the risks all too often outweigh the rewards. At the outset, what we see is that senior attorney in particular will frame the rewards to a key employee lawyer or lawyers that the rewards consist of, well, they'll be able to increase their compensation, they'll have access to the profits of the firm, they'll be able to manage the practice the way they'd like to manage it, take it to a whole nother level or even levels. And in that regard too is benefit by growing different practice areas that perhaps the stubborn senior attorney owner of the firm has not taken the practice to certain practice areas, and the key employee lawyers can build the practice, build out the practice, add on more practice areas. All sounds great. But then, because we're taught so well in law school to address and identify issues, well, those issues convert from the standpoint of an internal successor, that is a key employee lawyer, those issues turn into risks. And those risks consist of the following. First and foremost, what if the key employee lawyers, what if they're not able to originate the same amount or even more clients than the senior attorney founder or founders of the firm? That translates into a cash flow issue, right? What if we just don't generate enough cash here because we're not generating enough clients? How do we replace the senior attorney founder or founders of the firm, right? Those original founding attorneys, they're still generating matters. They're still cranking out work. Their name is still on the door. How do we replace that attorney or attorneys? Is it going to be one attorney, two attorneys, sometimes even more than two attorneys to be able to generate the work, do the work, maintain the goodwill of the practice? What if that key employee lawyer who is so used to getting a check every 2 weeks, not really a check in today's day and age, direct deposit of money every 2 weeks, known salary, what if instead of benefiting by higher compensation, access to profits, what if from the risk standpoint, the issue spotting standpoint, the key employee lawyer does not make as much money as an owner? And then what about personal exposure in terms of guarantees, right? The landlord is going to want a new signatory on the renewal of the lease. The bank is going to want a new signatory on the line of credit for the firm. And those risks just continue to add on and on. And that issue spotting, what winds up happening all too often is that what we see is that those key employee lawyers just consider that the risks outweigh the rewards. And let's look at what it is that your key employee lawyers, what do they really want? What key employee lawyers typically want is a reliable, predictable, and safe job. We call that RPS, reliable, predictable, and safe job. And we even put a meter on that. That is a job security meter. When the RPS, reliable, predictable, and safe job, is in the green, well, attorneys, key employee lawyers at your firm, they feel safe. They do not return calls from recruiters who contact them asking them whether they'd want to switch firms. They are appreciative of the fact that they have a challenging and fulfilling job. And what's on their mind, instead of thinking about, well, how could I pay for purchasing my boss's law firm, what's often on the mind at any given time in a given year for key employee lawyers is, wow, I really deserve a raise. I can't wait to get that bonus at the end of the year. So let's also look in terms of false expectations of senior attorneys. When senior attorneys are thinking about selling their law firms internally to key employee lawyers, we really caution that they should consider what we call the false expectations, really the four reasons why internal successors do not want to purchase their boss's law firm. First and foremost is that your key employee lawyers, you hire them as key employees. They wanted a job when they accepted the position at your firm. They still only want a job. Second, they went to law school and not business school. They joined and are part of the legal profession and are not typically aspiring to purchase and own a small business law firm. Often also, they can't afford to purchase your law practice. They have so many other expenses going on in their lives. They've got mortgages, they've got long-term student debt, college and graduate school, that is law school, student debt that they're carrying. They're paying for their cars, they're paying for their credit card bills, they're trying to save for their kids' colleges, they're trying to save for their retirement. They're thinking about how can we buy a second home. So when it comes to purchasing their boss's law firm, it's often just a bridge too far. And they also finally, in terms of that fourth reason why internal successors don't want to purchase their boss's law firm, because they just assume that the boss is never going to retire. I mean, the boss is the one who's writing the checks for their salaries, writing the checks for the landlord, coming in early in the morning, staying late at night, coming in on weekends, bringing in the clients, right? They just assume that the boss will never retire. So when it comes to why it is that your key employee lawyers consider purchasing their boss's practice as too risky, when they think about, yes, there could be rewards, they could enjoy profits, they could get higher compensation. Well, on the other hand, they could make less money. They could not enjoy profits. They could expose themselves to personal guarantees that you're just not comfortable with. Maybe they can't replace that gregarious senior attorney founder of the law firm with the business development skills that they probably have not developed over the course of their careers because they've relied so much on the founder for doing the rainmaking at the firm. And with all their great issue spotting that they do on behalf of your clients to protect your clients, when they're also wind up looking out for themselves and doing the issue spotting for themselves as they're weighing, is it more rewarding or more risky to purchase my boss's law firm? What we are often seeing in the marketplace is that your key employee lawyers, they do not want to purchase your law firm. They can't afford to, and they just consider it too risky of a proposition. Okay, so for our next question today, our next question is, how does success for a law firm seller look like post-sale? Okay, great. So before we can consider what success looks like post-sale, let's just review what it takes to get to selling the law firm. That is, what are the steps involved, really what we see in the marketplace as 6 meetings needed to sell a law practice. And what those 6 meetings consist of is a meet and greet, that is selling lawyer or lawyers from a senior attorney-led firm. They'll meet with prospective buyers. And what we're talking about here is a sale to a growing law firm. After the meet and greet, a due diligence period. Okay, we're sharing financials, we're sharing information about each firm. Then we start negotiating terms, negotiate the terms of a letter of intent that then leads to signing a letter of intent, negotiating an agreement, and then signing that agreement. From a time frame standpoint, we're typically seeing that that process can take 3 to 4 months, can take even as long as 6 months. And we're getting in the weeds and as good lawyers on both sides, negotiating all types of terms that then leads to the ink drying on the agreement. So now let's look at, how do we get to success? Okay, After the ink dries, after an agreement is signed between selling lawyer or law firm with growing law firms, really four steps that we see in the marketplace for how to achieve success after selling your law firm. And just to give more background, right? The typical sale involves a senior attorney or attorneys staying on with the firms that they sell to because those firms are going to need the senior attorney, the owner of the selling firm, particularly for the value of transitioning clients and referral sources. And we'll talk about this in a moment, trust transfer to lawyers at a growing purchasing firm. So, in terms of those four steps needed to achieve success, first and foremost is what we call a listening tour, right? Senior attorneys, you have run your own business, you've run your own practice, often for decades, even a full generation sometimes. And when you join a growing law firm, it is different. If we think about, if whether you experience this for in your life, or we can all relate to the following analogy of moving to a different high school, right? I mean, if you were in high school through 10th grade, okay, in a small, let's say in a suburb, and then your family moves to a city for junior year and senior year, right? Markedly different types of culture, experience. And in that first really month, we recommend to both sides, we've got to listen to each other. We've got to learn from each other. How is it done here as compared to how we've done what we've done at our firm for a generation sometimes. After that listening tour, which we're really recommending, we understand that billing has to happen. Of course it does. But those first couple of weeks, it's just crucial to listen. Second is, how do we start adapting, right? It's not easy. Going back to that high school analogy, right? I mean, you're going from the suburb to the city. It's gonna take time to adapt. There is difficulty. We're making another analogy to like a plane that the pilot says, look, is rough weather, right? We're going to get to cruising altitude, but before we get to cruising altitude, it's gonna be turbulent. The seatbelt sign is gonna be on a little bit longer than usual. And in the adapt phase, what we are seeing is that because there are differences in culture and differences of ways of how each firm does what they do, each firm, it's important to try to adapt to each other. That then leads to adopt, right? How do we adopt and achieve practices together? Quick story. Okay. We had a client that needed to do, as part of their practice, they do filings all over the country. Okay. It's just the nature of their practice. Call it a corporate practice. They have to file documents with what's called the Secretary of State of multiple states. Well, the selling firm did all of that in an Outlook calendar system. And guess what? The buyer didn't use Outlook. The buyer used Google as their platform for calendar system, right? Paralegals, lawyers, all just at loggerheads with each other as they're trying to adapt to each other, but they're at a crossroads because it's like Outlook versus Google, which was really like World War III in terms of the staff and the lawyers from both firms. Well, it's important. How do we adopt with each other, adopt the best practice? Pulled in an IT person, right? Didn't need to go to court. Didn't get close to going to court, by the way. But what we wound up doing was we had an IT person say, okay, can a Microsoft Outlook speak with Google Calendar, and we can actually maintain both calendars and they can talk to each other. Luckily, yes, they can. Okay. But that led to them adopting a practice together. And then that leads to this fourth step when it comes to the steps needed to achieve success. How do you grow together? Okay. And the key part of that growing together is not so much the mechanics of of getting out the documents, but growing together. The goals here is how to transition the clients and referral sources of a senior attorney led firm to the lawyers at the growing law firm. And the way that that is done is via trust transfer. The senior attorney is transferring the trust of his or her clients to the lawyers at the growing law firm that the senior attorney and additional lawyers at the selling firm have joined. That then leads to success where what we're seeing is that when we are growing together, senior attorney at that point is often saying, I should have done this earlier. Now let's look in particular at trust transfer. For any law firm sale to be successful in what we call law firm sales 1.0, and we'll get to that more in a few moments, and for any law firm sale to be successful, it relies upon transferring the trust of clients from a senior attorney founder or founders of a law firm to the lawyers at the growing law firm, because the consideration in those law firm sales 1.0 is dependent upon the revenues from that book of business of a selling attorney, those revenues continuing to be generated at the purchasing firm. And for the clients to transition from senior attorney led firm to growing law firm, how is that done? It's done via trust transfer. That is, that the clients trust senior attorney founder of law firm, senior attorney founder of the selling firm, then gains trust in the lawyers at the growing firm that the senior attorney has joined, and transfers that trust to the lawyers at that growing firm. We call this the flux capacitor of the senior attorney match model, right? If we think of the flux capacitor from the Back to the Future movie, right? How did time travel happen with Doc Brown, right? The time travel happened, if I remember this, 88 miles per hour. How do we hit 88 miles per hour in law firm sales? The 88 miles per hour is achieved by this trust transfer, which is done in three ways. It's done old school, in person. We're seeing this less and less, right? In the 21st century, post 2020 in particular, we are still seeing in-person meet and over a conference table, breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks. More and more what we're seeing is trust transfer over Zoom, Teams, or some other form of digital video medium, meaning that senior attorney seller can be almost anywhere in the world. I sit in the Northeast, right? So clients of ours from the Northeast, let's say in February, could be in the Southeast in Florida. Client calls, wants to meet with the senior attorney. Senior attorney says, let's go on a Zoom meeting, and it will be me, you, the client, and two of the partners back in the New York or Boston or Hartford, let's say, office. Senior attorney joins the Zoom meeting, explains, really reminds to the clients, I joined the such and such firm 6 months ago, and I'm excited to introduce you to my two partners, and they're in, let's say, the Hartford office. They can very capably handle your matter. I will be CC'd on emails. You can always send me a text message, leave me a voicemail message. You are in good hands with Mike and Rachel. And now I'm just gonna, leave the Zoom meeting and go back to fill in the blank, play pickleball at 11 o'clock in the morning in Fort Lauderdale, and the clients are in good hands. The trust transfer happens. And the third way the trust transfer is happening is via social media. That is, law firms that are welcoming senior attorney-led firms, they are communicating more often with the client list of the senior attorney who would have in yesteryear only sent out maybe a once a year Christmas card, holiday card, maybe a birthday card to the clients. Well, when senior attorneys are joining growing law firms and sharing the email addresses of their client list, the growing law firms are often sending out monthly e-newsletters, letting those clients know that they practice in such and such practice areas, which can be the same and often more expanded practice areas than what the senior attorney offered. And when clients see that information, they know that the firm that their longtime lawyer has joined now offers more practice areas. They automatically, because they see the face of the senior attorney whom they've known for such a long time, still associated with the growing law firm, they trust the fact that that growing law firm, good enough for him or her, good enough for me, and can very well be contacting the growing law firm without the senior attorney even being involved, because of the association via social media and that's not necessarily social media per se, by getting an e-newsletter, but seeing the lawyers associated with the growing law firm that their senior attorney joined, and knowing that they will be in good hands because of that trust transfer, which can literally happen digitally as well. So now let's look at success from a financial standpoint. right? How do we know when a senior attorney's sale of a law firm is successful? That measurement of success from a financial standpoint is measured in what we call law firm sales 1.0. What we're seeing in law firm sales 1.0 is the primary payment vehicle is an earnout price, because the most valuable components of value of a senior attorney seller is often their book of business. And buyers are often hesitant to pay upfront money for the book of business because they just don't know whether the clients will continue hiring the lawyers at the growing law firm that a senior attorney seller has joined. And importantly, banks are hesitant to lend on that as well, because a bank doesn't necessarily know, is that book of business going to perform into the future. So we talked before about the importance of trust transfer. When senior attorneys are transferring the trust of their clients and referral sources to the growing law firms that they join, those transferred clients who will continue and do continue to retain growing law firms, they are then paying for the legal services for the growing law firms that are providing those services, and the growing law firms are sharing the fees with the senior attorney seller via an earnout over a negotiated period of time. We're often seeing in the marketplace somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25% fee sharing on the revenues attributable to the client list and referral source list of a senior attorney led firm. That is that book of business, payable over somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 years, sometimes even longer. Now let's look at success from a non-financial standpoint. So, in terms of of how successful the sale of a senior attorney-led firm can be, there is absolutely a non-financial component to the success of selling your law firm. And what we see is really three non-financial components to success. First and foremost is the relief of no longer needing to run the office. What we are often receiving from initial calls from senior attorneys is they're just sick and tired of having to manage and run the office. When you sell your law firm to a growing law firm, and presumably you're continuing to practice in an of counsel capacity, it is an unbelievable breath of relief to no longer be responsible for paying for payroll, no longer having to pay for once a month rent, no longer needing to deal with replacing a paralegal, a legal assistant, heck, a copy machine. Second relief is just knowing that you've got a combined workforce, that your lawyers and parastaff who growing law firms by and large need, because they need the extra capacity to continue to represent the clients of a senior attorney's book of business. So you are bringing over your lawyers and your parastaff, as well as benefiting by a deeper bench from a growing law firm. And that is also a sigh of relief for senior attorney founders who know that their clients will continue to be in good hands. And then finally, non-financial, huge, really win for senior attorneys and a measurement of success is having the time to spend more outside of the office, right? The office can be such an anchor to founding attorneys, right? You have to go to the office. You're going back to the office. I'm on vacation, but I'm thinking about the office, okay? Well, when you sold your firm, even if you continue in an of counsel capacity at a growing law firm, being able to finally take a 3-week vacation, spend more time with grandchildren, and explore hobbies that you just didn't have time to do, read books that you didn't have time to read, travel to places you didn't have time to travel to. All of those factors, those components, are measurements of success as well when senior attorneys sell their law firms. Okay, so for our third question today, our next question is, could you please share several lessons learned by a selling attorney? Sure. So before we'll share some lessons learned from a particular attorney who sold his practice and gave us great perspective, where he has shared his perspective with us 3 years out from having sold his practice. We just want to share first that so much time and energy is spent on structuring the deal, right? That is, what are going to be the payment terms and what are all the logistics involved with selling your practice? It's also really important to think about once you have sold your practice, in particular, what's the first 180 days going to look like? And really, before that 180 days, what are key items to address after the ink has dried and an agreement has been signed? So just to identify a couple of highlights, right? So that is 30 days before the closing. It's really important to have client notices ready to make sure that bios are good to go on the law firm, that senior attorneys and additional attorneys at their firm are joining another firm, that we've got the bios ready to go by day one. What's the senior attorney led firms, what's their website going to look like, right? It's going to be just a landing page. It's going to have more information on it. People are going to want to find senior attorney and attorneys of the senior attorney led firm. How is that going to happen? And additional items 30 days out, how to finish up your malpractice insurance policy, just as another example. And then we think about, what do the first 30 days look like? What do days 30 through 90 look like? And then how do days 90 through 180 look like? So in days 1 through 30, it's really important to just do a listening tour, just to be listening and learning from both sides, so that we can get a real good sense of the lay of the land. Because what we find, if we don't do a listening tour, we use an analogy to just getting like stuck in the mud, right? If you think about old school, right? Some form of a cart that's being led by a horse or a mule, it gets stuck in the mud, it is going to go nowhere. And that's why the listening tour is so important. What the listening tour then leads to in days 30 through 90 is, how do we adapt to each other and how do we adopt best practices between both firms? What we see, and it's inevitable, okay, but what we see is that the owners of a growing firm at some point or another, they take out what I call a sheriff's badge, and they'll say, well, this is how we do it here, and that's just it. And then the senior attorney and other attorneys at the senior attorney led firm, and importantly, parastaff too, will say, all right, cool. Like, your sheriff's badge doesn't mean anything to us because this is how we've always done it. And we do it better than you. And like, all of a sudden, you're back in like the third grade out in recess. Okay. That's not what you wanted when you were negotiating the terms of the agreement. So important to adapt to each other, adopt best practices, try not to get pissed off at each other, right? There was a reason why you came together. It's challenging to bring two businesses together, two work styles together, but you had the foresight that these two law firms are better together. Okay, we're often saying chocolate and peanut butter. Okay, we come together, boom, we have Reese's peanut butter cup, right? So it's important in the days 30 through 90 not to get stuck in the mud, not to get caught up in the sheriff's badge and this is how we've done it and this is how we do it here. Adapt and adopt. And then after that, you're able to grow together. We're able to make referrals from the senior attorney of key clients and referral sources to lawyers at the growing firm, for the key employee lawyers of the senior attorney led firm to really integrate into the growing law firm. And literally, it can take this long, but within 90 to 180 days, you're at what I'll just call cruising altitude. There's going to be bumps, of course, cruising altitude, really growing together. So now let's get to these observations from a particular senior attorney match client. So a client of ours was kind enough to share, lessons learned from his perspective, looking back at about 3 years out after he sold his law firm by joining a growing law firm together with two attorneys from his office, and joined a firm that practiced in the same practice areas as him. Great synergies. And let's just look at some of those lessons learned that he shares with us. So first is compensation terms, right? Like, we negotiate the terms, of course, in advance. But what are those? How do they pay out? What are, if we're paying on an originations basis, right? Like, how are originations tracked? How and when are they paid? What is that compensation system really like? Okay, what are the roles of each lawyer and parastaff when they join the firm, right? Just to think about coming into a new school, right? You don't know, where the classrooms are, where the gym is, heck, where the right bathroom to go to is, like when they come into the firm, that is your lawyers and parastaff, okay? What's the lay of the land at the firm that you've joined, to make sure that someone is there that's teaching them those proverbial ropes. And that really leads to onboarding itself, okay? Like how is the onboarding going to happen with staff, but also importantly with clients, okay? How are clients going to be notified about becoming clients of the new firm? Are they going to need to, and yes, they really should, sign new engagement letters? What happens with retainers? What is that client experience going to be like, right? We as consumers, nobody as a consumer wants to be confused, okay, about, okay, I thought I was working with this law firm, now I'm working with that law firm, I just feel like I'm being treated like a number. That would be a disaster, right? So what does the onboarding look like? Now let's look at some additional advice that this senior attorney match client has offered. So really focusing on communications, right, with those clients and referral sources, right? What's the messaging that we're sending out, both in advance of a sale and after a sale, making sure that the clients know that they are appreciated, assuring them that they are in good hands. In fact, informing them typically, and that's what happened in this situation, where my client was with a what I call a small business law firm, right? Small firm, four lawyers, as I recall, multiple support staff. Then joined a much larger firm, right? It's able to tell the clients that, look, we have joined a larger firm. The billing rates, okay, are comparable. You're going to be able to get more services, and we are here for you together with our new colleagues, and also be able to communicate, importantly, from a business development standpoint, that the firm that we've joined offers such and such additional practice areas, and happy to introduce you to my new partners should you ever need these types of services. Next, from a very practical standpoint, is how do we deal with files, right? Digital files, paper files, right? Client calls. We want to be able to retrieve the paper file. We want to be able to access all of the digital records. Well, how is that done? Okay. When is it done? Where is it accessible from? And then finally, our client shares a particular practice tip, which I think is really valuable, which is, of course, everybody is on what we'll call their best behavior during the negotiations process, right? We're dealing with the decision makers, right? The decision makers see the value. They as entrepreneurs, let's say from the buyer side, see that, wow, we're bringing in 1 million, 2 million, 500,000, whatever that amount of money is, right? In new revenues. Let's seal the deal. Let's make sure we've got the right economic terms. But what our client is pointing out is important. Let's make sure that during the due diligence process, we're actually interacting with the people we're going to be working with, okay? And knowing what the department is like and how the workflow happens. We actually recommend that. We typically, as part of, we typically see 6 meetings that it takes for a law firm sale to happen. And one of those meetings, we're typically having our clients meet with both lawyers and parastaff from a growing law firm where they're going to work, and just get a sense for, okay, what is it really like here? So we're not, surprised on day 2, day 3, heck, day 33 or 333 after we've joined that growing law firm. Okay, so for today's Poock's post is the do's and don'ts of succession planning for lawyers. So what we see when it comes to succession planning for lawyers, there are clear do's and don'ts. In particular, we're focusing now on the mid-2020s, right? We are in the middle of a digital revolution, generally, societally, and that digital revolution has absolutely entered into the legal industry, right? We were an industry built upon, in terms of law firm growth, built upon rainmaker attorneys who handed out hundreds, thousands of business cards per year. And we are now in an era what we call the 3.0 digital era for the legal industry, where Google is becoming, and really we think has become, America's greatest referral source for lawyers. And I'm just pointing that out before explaining these do's and don'ts, because the energy source for all law firms is clients. And when you're thinking about succession planning for your law firm, we have to be thinking about, and we have to know that growing law firms who are the primary purchasers of law firms, their primary question is, what is your book of business? How many clients, how many referral sources are you bringing to our firm? And hence, the more valuable the book of business, the more valuable the firm. So on the dues standpoint, first and foremost, do please update your book of business. Okay. What is the contact information for your clients? What are their current addresses, email addresses, cell phone numbers? Second on the do list is please recognize that your key employee lawyers, they do not want to purchase your law firm, and they can't afford to either. Maybe some key employee lawyers do, but for the most part, key employee lawyers, what they really want is a reliable, predictable, and safe job, and not become the owners of a small business law firm. Third on the do list is please update the content of your website. That means please update your pictures. It's great that you've got a picture of yourself from 20 years ago. If you're like me, you had a lot more hair back then, okay? But nonetheless, it's not a picture of how you look. And I'm sure you're still handsome or beautiful. It's important to update pictures of yourself, lawyers at your firm, staff at your firm, as well as update the content itself. It's not just the pictures, of course, the content. Please reduce and remove articles that you've written 10, 15 plus years ago. And also, please, to the extent that you can hire a company to help you do this, to add 5-star Google reviews. Your clients, they like you, they know you, they trust you. And yesteryear, people would come into your office. They would love to read through or see thank you notes on the wall, or a notebook filled with thank you notes, thanking you for how great your services were. Well, today, that social proof, that yesteryear's handwritten letters in those notebooks at your law firm, that social proof today is 5-star Google reviews. Just so important to add those 5-star Google reviews to your website. Why? Because any particular buyer, let alone new client, okay, but any buyer, the first place they're going to go to is they're going to go to your website, and they want to see a fresh, updated website that has as many 5-star Google reviews as possible. Fourth on the do list is to recognize that growing law firms want and need senior attorney-led firms, because senior attorney-led firms offer 3 particular resources that all growing law firms need. They need your clients, right? They need to add new clients, because clients are the energy source for all law firms. They want and need your key employee lawyers and your trained and experienced parastaff. And third is they need your subject matter knowledge, not only for assisting with representing your clients, but your subject matter knowledge presents treasure chests of digital content. Literally convert your subject matter knowledge into digital content to publish to multiple platforms of social media, because today's and tomorrow's clients are looking online, they are reviewing social media posts, they're listening to podcasts, they're watching YouTube videos, and growing law firms want and need to convert that subject matter knowledge that senior attorneys and lawyers at their firms have, to convert that into digital content to attract the attention of potential clients for their firms. And then finally, the fifth do is to please expand your digital marketing, right? It's not natural. I recognize that, but it's here. It is today. It is how clients are looking for attorneys. And it's also how growing law firms are going to want to see. In particular, they're going to look at your LinkedIn profile. That's an easy one, just to update it and to please connect with ideally at least 500 other people. And if you could, start publishing to social media. You can hire a company. It is not expensive. It is not that difficult. It is not your niece. It is not your grandson. Okay. It is a digital marketing company that will assist you with taking that subject matter knowledge that you have and converting it into digital content, again, to attract the attention of would-be clients. Now let's look at the don't side of the ledger. Okay. On the don'ts in terms of succession planning for lawyers in the mid 2020s, here are the don'ts that we recommend. Please don't wait too long. Okay. Because your all important book of business, if you are continuing to rely upon word of mouth referrals for your new clients to come to your firm, which worked pre 2020, it worked pre Google. In today's post 2020 Google era, clients continue to bypass yesteryears. It is yesterday's too. Rainmaker. We firmly believe that we are in the age of the vanishing rainmaker. And if you wait too long because your book of business is diminishing, then the value of your practice is diminishing as well. Second, on the don't side is please do not assume that your key employee lawyers want to become internal successors for your law firms. By and large, internal would-be successors, that is your key employee lawyers, they just consider the risks as outweighing the rewards in terms of purchasing your law firm, and they do not want to purchase your firm, and they can't afford to either. The third don't is that please do not underestimate Google as America's greatest referral source for attorneys. Clients, just like we Google for everything today, they Google best fill in the blank, let's say estate planner, personal injury law attorney, intellectual property attorney, immigration law attorney, right? This could go on and on, near me. And then they'll see in the 3-pack of what's showing up for local service by and large, of what is showing up that Google is recommending, seeing a number of 5-star Google reviews associated with who is coming up. Figure, wow, if this number of people are giving 5-star Google reviews to this law firm, that law firm must be great. And if you have not caught up in terms of advertising digitally, you're just going to be overlooked. So underestimating Google is a don't. The fourth on the don'ts is just please don't maintain the status quo, right? Status quo can result in what we call a random Tuesday event. And there's two particular random Tuesday events that can just be devastating in terms of the value of a senior attorney-led firm. Random Tuesday event number one is if a key employee lawyer, right, the person that generates significant amount of work, they may not be the originators of the work, but they generate a ton of work, and a growing law firm is going to want the key employee lawyers as well. What happens if they walk down the hall on a random Tuesday and give you a 2 or 4 week notice after having practiced at your firm for years, if not decades? That's a random Tuesday number one if you're relying on status quo. Random Tuesday number two, unfortunately, even more devastating, is a premature death or incapacity of a senior attorney, founder, or owner of a law firm. Because if a senior attorney is not available to transfer the trust of his or her clients and referral sources to a purchasing firm, then the value of the practice, unfortunately, just plummets. And the fifth on the don'ts is to overlook the opportunity of converting subject matter knowledge to digital marketing content, because today's clients and tomorrow's clients, they will continue looking online for lawyers and law firms to hire. And if you are not investing in multi-channel digital marketing, you are not going to attract the attention of clients. And unfortunately, if you're not attracting the attention of clients, your book of business is not going to grow as well as it did in yesteryear. And the value of your practice, unfortunately, will decrease as a result. And that is episode 24 of the Ask the Law Firm Seller Show.